Yo, good looks to dreadsock.com for sponsoring this episode of Real Notes. Anyone who has curly or locked hair like me knows how sacred a good hair wrap is. A do-rag, a wave cap, a scarf, a bandana, a bonnet, you name it. Dreadsock goes a step beyond the average with silk-based head wraps that offer full protection and frizz control for curls from 2A to 4C. They're made of a blend of breathable materials to help retain hair's moisture and preserve hairstyles enough to ensure a few less trips to the salon, all held down with an elastic band strong enough to withstand even the most aggressive head trips. Whether you wear one to bed or wear one on the go, Dreadsock will have you looking fresh and full. Socks come in all sizes, from shorties for short hair and beginner twists to extra large for the longer locked folks out there. Look, y'all, I've been growing my locks for nearly 2 decades and have been a loyal Dreadsock customer for 15 years. So when I tell you these shits work, I'm dead ass. Plus, they're an independent, black-owned business that's worth the time and energy. So go to dreadsock.com and use promo code CineMasai, that's CineMasai, for 10% off your first order. They won't fall off in your sleep, but they will keep you looking fresh. Thanks again to Dreadsock for sponsoring the episode. Now let's keep this shit moving. What's good, y'all? My name is Dylan Green, and this is Real Notes, a space dedicated to blurring the cultural and artistic lines between rap and film. I'm here to chop it up with everyone from rappers and producers to journalists and video directors about their relationship to movies and how, if at all, film inspires their craft. My guest this week is Boston-based journalist, archivist, author, A&R, and lecturer Dart Adams. We spoke about the Amazon Prime series The Power, the WGA writer's strike, Why the Last Man, Infinity Train, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the phenomenon of cult films, the impermanence of streaming, how the internet has reshaped ideas of nostalgia and memory, and the importance of physical archiving and being outside to experience history. Come fuck with us. What's cracking, everybody? Welcome back. Welcome back to Real Notes. It's spring. It feels great outside. All my windows are open. I just washed my hair. Everything's feeling right. You know, it's gonna be a good summer. There's some bullshit going on, but you know, we manage, we thrive, maintain whatever we need to do. Dylan Green, CineMasai, got a lot of names, do a lot of shit, be around, but not like this man we have on the show today. I know. I say everybody I have on here is doing a lot of shit, but this man is doing a lot of shit and has been doing shit for, you know, like for a minute, a grip. Like he's important. This man is a journalist. He's an archivist, an author, a researcher, an A&R, a lecturer, a consultant, a human encyclopedia. Like don't let him hear you fuck up an album release date. let me just put that out there right now. This is a writing and a rap Twitter OG and a gatekeeper and fact checker supreme. We got fucking Dart Adams on the podcast today. Long time coming. Dart, thank you so much for being here. You know, like we go back a ways, but like I appreciate this. It means a lot that you're here right now.
Thanks for having me, man. Any podcast called Real Notes, I was like, how am I not on there? That's two of my things, notes and film.
Like, come on, man. Yeah, nah, like I had reached out to you a year ago and I was like, yeah, we're gonna make it happen. And then, you know, life got busy and it just didn't happen. But we're here, we're doing it, and you know, like we said off camera, we have so much to talk about just in general, but let's just start it off nice and simple. First question I ask everybody who comes on: what's the last movie or TV show you watched that you had a strong opinion about?
So the last TV show I watched that I had a strong opinion about is probably The Power. And the reason is because the things that are happening in The Power parallel what's happening in life right now. This is a show about young women who acquire this power of electricity through this thing in their body, right? We're not 100% sure if it's an organ or not, or if it's something superficial that just showed up, but they're able to generate electricity through it, and then you discover they can transfer it to people. And then you think about all the oppression and all the misogyny and all the abuse that women face, you know, all across the world. And it appears in different forms in every different society, every country, what have you. And now these young women have this power to protect themselves and they can pass it to older women. It starts with young women, right?
Oh wow.
It's the older women. And, men try to, have autonomy over women's bodies, and it changes the playing field. But what happens is you have some people that get corrupted by this power and want to become demagogues damn near. And then you have people that want to like lead women to the promised land, just get them free. And then you have the men in the middle who are either the enemies are threatened by it, or who have to figure out how they're going to be allies, and there's so much going on in this series that you can see multiple layers working. And like I watch how it like evolves and everything like that, and you start wondering like if you're a writer, and again it's adapted from a novel, but
Right.
the thing is that everything is adapted from anything nowadays. Any IP that's adapted, that's an adaptation, you have to find a way to make it work within the confines of real life, especially post the pandemic, because everybody's sensibilities are way different now. So that's the last thing I have strong opinions about. Everything else, everybody already talks about to death. All the other shows that are out are the ones that everybody's already talked about on Twitter. I don't see anybody discussing the power on Twitter.
Right. See, I'm happy you said that, because I was thinking like, damn, I hope he doesn't say Snowfall.
Yeah.
I've talked to at least 3 or 4 people about Snowfall, and that's great, but it's just like, okay, like
Everybody's discussing Snowfall. And the thing about that is that, I was somebody who was really engrossed with Snowfall the first 5 seasons, and then from there I realized maybe the discourse about Snowfall going forward isn't the move, because it's gotten really weird. And then I've never been a fan of the Snowfall versus The Wire discussion, because I feel like it's a lot of it is recency bias, and we're also dealing with the fact that anybody who remembers The Wire when it came up after The Corner, The Wire did not get big ratings. The Wire was one of those shows that was like loved by critics and a part of the audience that grew and had more people watch it. And one of the things we always know about The Wire is that season 2 is not an easy watch.
No, it isn't.
But for those of us that live for backstory, that live for world building, that look for these type of things, that's everything to us. Season 2 is everything, because it outlines everything. I know people that skip through and skim through season 2 of The Wire because something happens in season 3 and season 4 and season 5, and they're like, "Who's this person? Why is that happening?" I was like, "You didn't watch season 2." And
Right.
like, I live for. And when it comes to writing and layers and backstory and world building, I'm kind of a nerd in that sense, because that's where I sink my teeth into. That's why Reddit threads were invented, and unfortunately, they hijacked by racists and idiots.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, like I haven't watched The Power. It sounds really interesting, and just based off of your description, I get a lot of I'm assuming you've read and or seen Why the Last Man before, right? Because it's Why the Last Man is one of my favorite. Like like women don't get powers, but for anybody who hasn't seen or read Why the Last Man, any being on the planet Earth with an X chromosome just dies. Or no, excuse me, with a Y chromosome just dies. Like they all die. Like even like the sperm, everything just dies. So it's just nothing but women and one man. And this one man becomes the framing and the perspective is different from something like The Power, where like obviously like Why the Last Man is kind of centered around this one man in a world full of women versus women having powers. And like that's really interesting to me. I just saw that Toni Collette's in it. And I love Toni Collette, so I'm a tap in just for that. But like, how is it? I'm sorry to cut you off. How is it a whole season so far, or is it just like episode by episode?
It's episode by episode, and I think we're gonna finish the season off probably this month. But like with Why the Last Man, when you look at the adaptation, right? It happens during the pandemic. It comes out darker, which is crazy. It comes out
way darker, like Jesus.
So darker than a lot of people expected. And I'm like, think about what it's about. And I feel like when people read the graphic novel, they got the idea of the story, but they didn't realize how grim, how dire the situation was by reading the graphic novel, I guess because of the colors. But when you see it on film, it's really dark. It's really morose. It's really sad. watching these people mourn all the men, and then realize that, wait, with these men gone, we can do X, Y, and Z. But also, with these men gone, what do? We can't make more people. But with these men gone, so like
Yeah.
these questions keep happening. And by the time the series was over, because it was aired on FX,
Yeah.
they were like, I don't know if we want to do another season of this. We barely made it through the first one. And I'm like, I was so pissed off because I waited, close to 20 years for that.
Same, man. I'm so bad about it. But like they didn't really do the best. Like, I wish I liked it more. Like, to me personally, it would probably be better if they just did like I'd want to watch like a mini series of Why the Last Man. Like, we don't need 7 or 8 seasons of Why the Last Man. We need like give me like maybe like 3 like mini movie length series about it. Like that seems like the type of thing. I mean, like that's just my opinion. It hasn't been made yet, so we don't know if it would work. It's just like it just wasn't. It just didn't hit me the way I wanted it to. Especially like as a fan of the book, and it did some things well, did some other things not super duper well. I get why people didn't really latch onto it, but but how do you think The Power is faring this season so far?
I don't know, and that's the thing, right? The
Mm.
reason I have such a strong opinion about it is I'm pretty much in a vacuum. I don't see anybody talking about it, and I'm like, it's on, And then again, it's like the same token. I don't see anybody talking about this season of Yellow Jackets.
Mm.
Everybody's talking about Succession.
Yep.
Nobody's talking about Yellow Jacket. Nobody's talking Yellow Jackets. Nobody's talking about Power. Everybody was talking about Snowfall, but there were other shows that were on, and I'm just like, is no one paying attention? Like, nobody. So I feel like it's one of those things where there are certain things that people just want to watch and keep to themselves, especially with the way Twitter's going. The discourse on Twitter has changed dramatically following, apartheid Elon taking it over.
Yeah.
And we used to rely on Twitter to point us to things we're not watching. There were a lot of shows that I didn't even realize I was missing. Like, I spent 4 years missing Bosch until somebody hit me to it on Twitter. And I was like, and when I started watching Bosch, I'm like, I feel like a complete ass for having never watched this, So, and like the thing about films, right? One of the things I discovered about real-time social media was one of the greatest things about being in blog comment sections was people recommended movies to you.
Yeah.
And the reason why that happened, a lot of people forget, is that around 99, 2000, I was an early adopter. My younger brother and I were early adopters to Netflix when it was mail, when it came through the mail.
Mm-hmm.
That was largely due to the fact that I used to manage video stores. I was a manager at Tower Records in Boston when it was at 360 Newberry Street. And then I worked at other stores, that dealt with, I was in charge of the whole video, books, and Ticketmaster floor, which was massive. And like we worked in other video stores. And then I worked at a place that did used CDs and used DVDs. They used to clean the CDs, get rid of the surface scratches. They had a special technique to do it. And we used to buy them, and we had to learn everything about films and everything, like back to front. When you worked at a video store in the late 90s, they would give you a test. They would quiz you about what you know about film. And back then, you couldn't Google anything. You were Google.
Right.
People used to call up the store and be like, hey, yo, what's this movie where this and this and this and this happened? And you had to know it or ask somebody who is around if they remembered this thing. There was no YouTube to go look up. So if someone talking about a big track, you had to find somebody who knew what big track was to, yes, he's not crazy. There was this toy called the big track. Now, if you talk about the big track, let me go on YouTube and go, oh, there's the commercial. Or let me go on Wikipedia. Oh, here's what the big track was. Here's the company that make it. Oh, wait, there's a guy that still makes them today and can ship them to you. You can find him on eBay. Imagine none of that shit exists. It's all up here. That's where I thrived.
Yeah. It's always where you thrived, like that's the thing that makes you unique as not even just like a person doing discourse on Twitter, but just like as a writer, You know, I want I wanted to get into this later, but we're here now. So like, you know, you hang on a second, sorry. You know, like you've always been preoccupied with, you know, like history, and like more important than that, you know, like accuracy, like more so than a lot of writers and pundits and people that I know. And you know, like so much of that, and not to say that other people don't care about accuracy and things like that, but like, you know, like I feel like we talk about this all the time, just like in general, just like this inclination to be first as opposed to being right. You know, like we're all playing the engagement and algorithm game. So people just want to get their shit off however they can. But you know, like you were saying, you came up in a time where, you know, like you had to be your own fact checker. You know, like you couldn't just say a thing and then be like, oh yeah, let me go check Google or Wikipedia. I rely on that a lot because I came up on that. I came up on the tail end of having to do your own shit, and then that kind of combined with the internet shit, you know, like in a way, well, with like my developing brain and shit. So like, you know, I'm always really fascinated when I see you talk about anything, because like I know it, you know, like you've committed it to memory in ways that I don't want to say aren't necessary anymore, but are at least not like the primary way of doing things, you know? So like I think that's dope. And you know, like as things have developed, especially online over the course of the last like 10, 15 years, like how have you seen things change? You know, like I know that's like kind of like a big
No,
question, but like
trust me, it's something I think about all the time. These are the things that I think about all the time, and I write about it. So first thing, right? The reason why I am such a stickler for accuracy, it's basically a byproduct of the way my brain works and the way my memory works. People are under the impression that I remember everything. I remember all the dates, all that stuff like Mary Lou Henner does. I don't. I remember everything that happened, and then I have to fill in all the blanks after the fact. That's why I'm so. That's why I have to. I'm so facts and accuracy is so important to me, because that's how I keep everything up here
right.
in line, and it's how I don't go insane. So I have to know that in 1988, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, what happened? Because I was outside in summer '88, and I remember MC Light's album was out already by spring, you know? So when I go on Wikipedia and I see that it used to say MC Light's Light as a Rock was released September 13th, 1988. It doesn't say that anymore. It's been updated multiple times after me for years saying no, it was out. And then me pulling up proof. See, this is the May 14th, 1988 issue of Billboard, and MC Light's album and Audio 2's album are at the top of the, hot black albums chart, so they were out already. And like doing stuff like that. But the reason why I keep everything in order is because it's how I process things in my brain. So I know that because I've had to drill it into my head, like figure out, okay, when did the Jungle Brothers album come out? When we went to go get the Jungle Brothers album, my big brother Dave and I went to Nubian Ocean. No, he went to Nubian Ocean and I was outside, and he came back with it on vinyl. And we were outside, we were rocking shorts, and it was near my 13th birthday. So that's how I know these things, right? And then I fill in everything from there. Being in summer school and hearing and seeing a drug dealer drive by with their Jeeps blasting Sally from Stetsasonic. So I know that album was released around June, because at the same time my brother came back from Skippy White's with Public Enemy's It Takes a Nation of Million to Hold Us Back. And we sat there and listened to the album astonished, because it was such a leap from the first album that he bought, the first Public Enemy album that he bought spring in '87. So this is how I know all these things, because yes, I was outside, but also my memory. But I have a cheat code. The cheat code is, when you're a child, the world is very different. If you're an only kid, if you're 3 or 4 years old, you don't have any scope of the world outside of this little bubble that you live in. My big brother's 6 years older than me. My older sister is 9 years older than me. And being born in 1975 means that nothing catered to little kids. Like there was Channel 2, in Boston, Channel 2 and Channel 44, which is PBS. And you had Sesame Street, you had Electric Company, you had the show called Vegetable Soup, you had 3-2-1 Contact, things of that nature, right? But past that, I was watching whatever my big sister or big brother were watching. So I was exposed to different things. Then when I was a kid, I would go upstairs, and we had two family friends, James and Derek, who were like maybe 10 and 12 years older than me. So I'm a 3-4-year-old going upstairs, hearing the new Rick James, hearing the new Prince. And with the way my memory works, I remember walking into that room and hearing these records, and I could read it 2.5. And that's another thing. So I remember reading these albums and the credits and the liner notes, just sitting down as a kid and then going through my mom's records, her 8-tracks, and playing. I remember all of this. So this is a unique situation. There are no 3 or 4-year-old Prince fans from 1978, 79, right? I'm a very unique case.
Right.
So again, that's what lends to my writing. That's what lends to my memory, and that's what lends to the way I frame the world. Because I remember the event. I remember what happened. I have to go back and figure out what time of year it was. What was the date? So that's why I'm able to keep all that stuff in the check I am. But like when it comes to like film and television, it's the same way. I was a little kid. I remember watching the Jackson 5 used to have a variety show.
Yeah,
I remember things that happened in episodes of that variety show, and I had no frame for when it happened. However, this is hilarious. On YouTube years ago, somebody uploaded the entire run of the Jackson's Family variety show. And I realized that my memories came from the second season when they came back in 1977. Yeah. So that's how my memory works. And it's the same thing with stuff I watched on TV when I was a kid and movies that I was exposed to by my older sister and older brother.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
But the world works so differently then, man. In terms of how things changed. This is why this is important. I had to remember phone numbers.
Oh man. Yeah.
I had to remember phone numbers off the top of my head. I knew my 10 best friends' phone numbers.
Talk about it.
I knew that when I went to certain parts of the city or certain neighborhoods, I had to buzz the door, or I had to scream up to a window, I had to throw a rock at a window, or I had to go a certain way. I had to remember work schedules of friends and their families, when I had to come through the house, and when I had to leave, when we had to clean up because they were going to bust his ass and we were never going to be able to chill again. Or someone was going to call my mom talking about, I ain't having home training, your kids came over and fucked up my entire house, and then I'm going to get my ass beat for something that I didn't even do. So the world works so different in terms of like what we had to memorize. You had to carry change in your pocket because they were paper phones. It's like the world works so differently. And the thing was, again, like I said earlier, I was talking about how you had to remember things and you had to find somebody to corroborate your story. Yo, remember that episode of Thundar the Barbarian where they went to Boston and it was called the city of thieves or something like that? What? No one has that shit on tape. There's no way to find it. You have to find somebody who remembers it and fills in the blanks with you. And maybe a third person be like, nah, you got it wrong. So it's it's like a game of telephone.
Right.
That's the way memory worked back in the day. And in terms of nostalgia, if I was to show you my bookshelf, I have a whole lot of stuff from my youth and teenage years that I saw as grails, things I always wanted, things I thought if I got them, I would be fulfilled, right? I have shit like Robotech art books 1, 2, and 3 that I saw older kids have. And I was just like, one day. Now, between the late 90s, there was no eBay yet. So I would have to physically, and this is what I'm talking about, how the way the world works in this house so different. I would have to physically go to, maybe hop on the train, maybe get in a car with a friend, go to used bookstores and hope, against hope, that I would run into one of these books used on a shelf. And I would have enough money to be able to buy it as an adult. Now, I could show you this shelf over here. I have so many fucking books that I couldn't afford back in the day. I was eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and tuna fish sandwiches. I got them all. I have them all now. And all I had to do to buy them was go online and type in a simple search. And oh, somebody in Passaic, New Jersey has this shit for $299.
Shout out to Jersey. I'm right near Passaic. That's so funny.
Yeah. So I buy it immediately. They ship it out to me, and I have it. And I've been wanting this thing for 20 years. So the world works completely differently, man. And it's a mind fuck for somebody who remembers the years where you're just thinking about, I'll never own this pair of sneakers. You know, I'll never have this jacket. I remember this T-shirt from 1993 when the Celtics went into the playoffs, and I'll never see it again. And I'll type it in, and I'll say, "Yo, what happened to this?" And somebody will send me a link to what do you call it? Not Etsy, Pinterest. Someone will send me a Pinterest link with that T-shirt from 1993, and I'm like, "Oh, so there's a lot." So how the world works differently? There was shit that was lost. Things that we'll thought we'd never see again. Things that were lost in memory. It can all be recalled in an instant. There's books and magazines that I had back in 1981, 82, 83 that I haven't seen since. If I type it into Google, somebody uploaded the PDFs of the entire run of that magazine from 1979 to 1993.
Or it's on like Google Read or some shit. Yeah, totally.
Exactly. So so I talk about like how different things are and how much of a mindfuck it is for somebody with a memory like mine. I'd be like, yo, I remember right after the Celtics lost in 1985, they fucked over New Edition by having them in Billboard with the picture with the Lakers. It was for the video of My Secret. And people be like, that didn't happen. And I can go to the archive, world radio history, go to Billboard, scroll down to the date I said, click it, and then I'll tell you, scroll down to page 17, the bottom of the page. So that's how things have changed. Technology has completely changed things, but also what it's done is it's like made my legend even greater, because there was shit that I was writing on all hip hop's forums in 2005 to 2007, and people thought I was making it up. And 85 to 90% of all those things I said have now been corroborated. So it's wild.
Yeah, man. Like it's, you know, like I kind of came up like right at the, like I was kind of saying before, I came up like right at that transition period where like I was born in 92. So you know, like the internet's a thing, and we had a computer growing up, but obviously it's not what it is now. And like this was still a point where like, you know, like I had to memorize phone numbers. I still have there's like 7 or 8 phone numbers in my head that I've known for like 30 years, you know, damn near. And like some that I've known even longer than that, just because like they're people that I love, you know, like my partner's phone number, my best friend's phone number. Like there's people's numbers, like I could call them right now and just know it. But like everybody, but like ever since after a certain point, there's people's numbers I couldn't tell you. You know, like there are like people who are like my homies for life, whose number I couldn't tell you their number. You know, that's just kind of like how the shit worked. And you know, like there's, you know, like coming up, there were definitely times when, or like there are definitely times when I can be like, oh, this movie was airing on this channel at this time of the year. You know, like because like I spent a lot of time watching you know, like there'd be like HBO and Stars marathons, and like during the summertime, you'd be like watching like like Baby Boy would be running on Stars, and Undercover Brother would be running on HBO, and like whatever else. Like I was like I was a big like Disney Channel person, so I'm like I know like when they were running the reruns of like all the old cartoons that were like 10 years before my time, but they were all airing them on Disney Channel and Toon Disney, and be like, okay, so like that's kind of like my fascination with that kind of shit started so young, because like that was all we had really, you know. And like the internet was starting to come into itself, and you know, like by the time I got into high school, it was at the point, or by the time I got into middle school, really it was at the point where stuff was a little more instantly recalled, not just from physical memory, but you know, like it's kind of like having that, it's like almost like a mutation of having to remember everything versus having it all available for you, you know.
It's absolutely a mutation. So being a Gen Xer, so the thing that kills me about Gen Xers a lot of times is they absolutely forget everything that happened. So they'll blame somebody for some shit. And I'm like, dude, we got blamed for everything. Like, what are you doing? You're stupid. But as a Gen Xer, what happened was we tend to forget how we were socialized, right? And how come these kids can't? Well, for one thing, the world's completely different and everything is different. We didn't have cable growing up, you know? We had, at most, 10 to 12 channels based on what you had on UHF or VHF that came in clear, right? And the thing is that we were at the mercy. If you didn't have a VCR yet, too, because niggas is broke. If you were at the mercy of these channels and you didn't want to be bored, you were going to watch whatever the fuck came on TV. Now, I'm born in the 70s. My older siblings were born in the late 60s, right? So this means that when you're a kid watching TV, you're watching black and white shows from the 40s and 50s and 60s, and then sometimes in color. What? When did color start happening? So you're watching rerun movies from the 40s and 50s. You're watching shit like Lifeboat with Tallulah Bankhead and John Canada, right? You're watching things like Bogey and Bacall marathons. So you're watching Have Picky Missed, you know, like and I didn't know that Bogey and Bacall were that far apart in age. But at the same time, I'm watching cartoons from the 40s and 50s with a whole bunch of stars from the 40s and 50s. I know who Jimmy Durante is because he's the dude with the big nose that goes, yeah, cha, 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 cha. I know that Lauren Bacall's nickname was Baby because cartoon Humphrey Bogart calls her Baby in the cartoons with Bugs Bunny, right? I know that Frankie, the skinny kid, is supposed to be a young Frank Sinatra, who's a jazz singer who croons because of cartoons, you know? But I'm watching all these old films. I'm watching I Love Lucy, you know? So, and then also like black and white shit like Superman, I Love Lucy, Father Knows Best, My Three Sons, Leave It to Beaver, you know, Ozzie and Harriet. I'm watching all of this as a kid. So, and then like the Little Rascals. To give you an idea of how weird we were socialized, my brothers and I would watch the Little Rascals. It would run for like 2 hours. And I will remember watching one, and it was in black and white, and it's Darla, Alfalfa, Spanky, you know, Buckwheat, you know, everybody. And these kids are singing about the Army, a celebration because it's a war, to the Army, the Navy, and the Marines. And my brothers and I are sitting there like, why'd they leave out the Air Force? I promise you, why'd they leave out the Air Force? And then when it ends, back in the days, it would have Roman numerals of the year. And we look at the year and we're like, oh, wow, this is that long ago. And we got up. My mom used to get this thing called the Breuer's World Book of Knowledge, encyclopedias. And then she used to get, what do you call them, almanacs.
Yep.
And then she used to get thesauruses and everything. So we had this big wrought iron bookshelf with all these books. So we had our own library in the house. So we didn't always have to go to the library. So we go to the Breuer's World Book of Knowledge, blue books with gold foil with a gold tree and blue and gold leaves. I'll never forget it. We go through and we look up the Air Force. The Air Force didn't exist yet when that was filmed. When that was filmed, and it's airing on TV in like the mid to late 80s, and we're just like, oh shit, there was no Air Force yet. So that's how we were socialized as kids. So we knew stuff from the 40s, 50s, 60s. We know who Pearl Bailey is, you know? We know who famous jazz musicians are. So another thing, Bugs Bunny, there's a cartoon where there's this dude who's like he's a conductor, and then goes, Leopold. You play that cartoon now, someone have to Google who Leopold was. Leopold was alive. We knew who Leopold was. You know? So everything we know now is different. Like we were exposed to things that happened way before our age group. We had to know these things. Like if you ask a kid now, How do you get to Carnegie Hall? He'll stare at you blankly. When we were kids, we knew it was practice, practice, practice. Who's buried in Grant's tomb? Nobody knows the answer to that question now. We knew because it was a takeoff of a joke that Karl Marx used to do on his show. And he just wanted you to win and get any money. Who's buried in Grant's tomb? You know? So shit is different. So how come these kids don't know more than they should? Because the way they're socialized is way different than us. Like a stitch in time saves 9, right? These kids never. It's as easy as falling off a log. These kids never heard that shit before. A penny saved is a penny
earned. Yeah.
You know, kids haven't heard that, and I feel like Gen Xers completely forgot that our lives are completely different. When I was introduced to a computer, I got my first computer. My dad was a computer programmer, and he wanted us to learn computer language. So it was BASIC. And in 1984, my dad got us a VIC-20. Then he was like, I could just get a Commodore 64 for just a little bit more money, and it's way better. So we got us a Commodore 64. Our Commodore 64 came with a disk drive, a tape drive. It had a cartridge slot. We had one remote control. Joystick. And that joystick was a stick that went 4 directions with one action/fire button.
Yeah, talk about the Atari controller. Yeah.
And then later on, it upgraded to it was 8 directions, and it had 2 fire buttons, one on top and one down here, and it had a suction thing that you could put at the bottom and hold it. But the thing is, the world was so different with the way we process information and what we knew versus these kids. They don't need to know all the other shit. They're not exposed to all the other shit, and they're laser focused on what they know, what they need to know, and what they like. Whereas we didn't have that option. Like I was watching fucking Beach Blanket Bingo because there was nothing else on. I was watching 7 Brides for 7 Brothers because it was either that or go to sleep. You know, so I know all these things that, like, how do you know that? Well, on Channel 2, the thing that came in clear, it was all these British shows. So we're watching Benny Hill, we're watching Doctor Who, we're watching Red Dwarf, Upstairs, Downstairs, Faulty Towers. You know, Monty Python's Flying Circus. So thing about Monty Python's Flying Circus is they have very, very fast-moving, dry humor, and there's always people laughing. So you realize, I'm missing jokes.
You got to catch up.
You got to catch up.
You got to catch up.
They would do a whole skit about the battle at Hastings in 1066. So I got to go to that bookshelf and figure out what the fuck happened in 1066 with the battle of Hastings. You know?
See,
that's our lives. So that's why we're so different from these young kids.
That's crazy you say that, because I had a handful of similar experiences. I'm a big Simpsons fan. I feel like people probably know this. And like The Simpsons was pretty much just that, you know, like their cultural reference points were so broad, like between music and history and fashion and like old comedies, you know, like stuff like The Simpsons and Futurama, you know, like I would see random references to things and be like, oh, what's that? And, you know, like I would either go look it up in a book or go on the internet and figure that out. You know, like there's like analogs and like successors to stuff like that now. And obviously things are way more readily accessible now than they were even 10 years ago. You know, like you know, like you said, everyone just kind of processes things differently. You know, like I'd be really fascinated because like I know there are plenty of people younger than me even who are like really fascinated by this type of stuff that you and I are, and they just kind of go about it completely differently. You know, like if things like if you come across something, you can Google it now, and that's great. You know, like like that's like a fantastic innovation that I use every day, and I know it's kind of like, you know, like people use TikTok as a search engine nowadays. You know, like that. That's crazy to me. You know, like I don't personally do it, but like I know that's what, you know, like that's just like where we're at now. You know, like every generation has different ways of processing the world, whether that's through like a TV show or through like a love of movies or just through like a general love of knowledge. You know, I think like the great equalizer for me is like you kind of mentioned it before, like being outside and like being in the mix, which is what makes your perspective such a valuable one, because, you know, like you don't, you know, like you were outside and you can like associate and like this kind of like this can go for anybody. It doesn't just have to be like a Gen Xer. Like, like there are certain aspects of certain generations that are gonna make more sense to you if you were outside to experience them. Like I was there for the tail end of the blog era. Like I can talk about that stuff. I can talk about the rise of Odd Future. I can talk about the rise of ASAP because like I was there. Like I saw people playing. I saw people playing Ferg Shabba Ranks at house parties. Like I saw Dipset happen. Like I was in school when Dipset happened. I was in school when State Property and Rockefeller and all that happened. I was in school when Lupe put out all these projects. Like so like this is stuff. Like I lived that and I was outside to an extent. Like I wasn't like outside crazy, but like like I was there. Like in the same way that people watching somebody like a Dro Kenji, for example, like people like kids who are like 15, 16 years old being outside watching Dro Kenji happen or watching Doja Cat happen. Like they were outside for that,
The context is crucial, right? Because if you're outside and you see all the levels and you see everything moving, you see people, the recognition, you see coming up from what is this to, yo, this is kind of dope, to now putting other people onto it and then seeing the first thing where you're like, oh, this is gonna blow, and have a front row seat to all of that, right? Like that changes everything. And when we talk about like film and television, right, it's super important, because one of the things I've always been fascinated with my entire career, especially when it comes to film and television, is the cult film, right?
Yeah,
and
man.
Cult film happens. I was so captivated by it. And the thing that really threw me into it even more was, being a kid, growing up, not having cable for years, hearing things by word of mouth, and then getting a VCR. And there were very few game changers in the mid to late 80s, especially in Black and Latino households, than getting a VCR. Why? Because getting a VCR opened you up to a new world. But the other level of it was the video store. Now, you had the big, huge video stores, right? You had the chain video stores. Locally in Boston, we had a local chain video store called Video Smith. And this was during the crack era. So things operated very differently. Now, back in the days when you wanted to get a video store, you got an application. You filled it out. But in order to apply to have a video store membership, you had to have a credit card. You had to put down advance or a deposit. Then you had to buy pretty much your card. And then you had to open that account. Because here's what people don't realize. Back in the days, rental VHS tapes ran you anywhere between $84.95 to $119.99 for a rental copy.
They were expensive. Yeah.
They were super expensive. And if you go through the inflation calculator and maybe type those numbers in for 1986, 87, 88, 89, 90, you'll realize why it's such a big deal, what it means in today's money. So you could not lose a VHS tape because you had to afford to replace it. And late fees were a bitch because that money, again, was insane. So if you are a trusted person, they raised how many movies you could rent at once. At first, you could probably rent out 3. Then they move it up to 4, then 5. If you have a family, then they had to divide it. Because if you have a family, right? And let's say my family, for example, I told you the tiers. There's me and my younger brother. We're teenagers. My older brother and older sister, 6 and 9 years older than me. Then there's my mom. My mom's not necessarily going to go to the video store, but we'll rent for her, right?
Yeah.
So it gets to the point where they have to give us separate cards because we're running separate accounts. But we've had an account for so long that we can finesse it where, like, I could take out 3, you could take out 4, you could take out 4. Right? Now, why is this important? Because there was another creation called the video player and the VCR. The video player, you understand where I'm going with this. The video player only plays cassettes. And you had enough wires to connect it to a second VCR. which can pause, dub, record from television,
Yep.
and another VCR. So why are we renting all these damn movies? Because we're recording them and then selling them.
Right. Yeah. Bootleg tapes. Exactly. Yeah.
Bootleg tape, right? But the thing is that when you have a video rental account and you go to a video store in the 80s, you know this is how this shit is spreading when people don't have cable.
Right.
So, and this, especially in Black and Latino households, there's a lot of movies that Gen Xers hold close and dear to their heart before they had cable. And being outside, you know why these movies work, because you remember the standees, you remember the commercials on TV, you remember the talk about them. It's the same thing where you remember people talking about how the stories about how people couldn't beat Rygar, so they would keep it on all night because it had no pause to save feature and no password feature. So people would leave it on and they'll start a fire. Fires would be started from NES's with Rygar. Those anecdotal stories. It's the same thing with VHS tapes or rentals, So there are those films from the 80s and the 90s that became cult classics through that lens. And I didn't get cable until Christmas 1990. So 1990 into 1991, I'm finally able to see, this is what HBO and Cinemax, and you're there for when Cartoon Network starts. You're there for when Comedy Central starts.
Man.
You're there from when MTV introduces liquid television. You're there for when MTV, when you see Aeon Flux blow up. You're there when Daria blows up.
And the Max and shit and the head and
right? So when I say context and being outside, all this factors into understanding how something grows and blows up, how seeing Akira spread over years. And
can't
now,
even imagine.
Yeah. And now you talk about indie films, right? Indie films is another animal because, you know how we talk about hip hop and the golden eras?
Yeah.
Same thing happened with film. It happened on the underground and in the mainstream. Same thing happened in film. You look at like Christopher McQuarrie. You look at dude who made Reservoir Dogs, and then Tarantino. Like you look at the first wave, Spike Lee and Jim Jarmusch.
Yeah.
She's Got to Have It, Down by Law. Black and white movies, both of them. They came out in 86.
Yep.
86 is the beginning of the first golden era. And when these other guys came up and started changing film on an indie level, Bottle Rocket, all these other indie films, it's the second golden era. Right. I'm talking 1992 to 1996. So there's this parallel, right? And if you weren't outside, and again, I'm born 1975, so I turned 18 the summer of 1993. So I could go to art house cinemas, and see these tiny little films that come out in the theater. People forget about them. They get distribution deals, and then all of a sudden they're in the video store now, and now people are picking them up. And it takes years for that film to finally blow up. I go back and forth with Shea Serrano. You know Shea Serrano.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, shout out to Shea. He's an alumni of the show.
Part of Shea Serrano's his persona is Miklo from a movie called Bound by Honor.
I know Bound by Honor. Yeah.
That film was released in theater 30 years ago this month. Now, what's insane is that movie flopped in the box office. Fucking flopped. Nobody went to see it. But everybody saw it on cable, or everybody saw it when they rented it, and it got passed around the hood.
Right.
Everybody spoke that film bars. Everybody knows that film backwards and forwards.
The hood definitely gave that movie its second life for sure. Like,
so yeah, it just goes to show you, like, and then like the other thing with film, it makes you understand better about life, and also it makes you understand more music, because the same movies that we were watching, the same movies that were circulating around the hood, are the same films that rappers were watching. Why do you think Nas made a song that interpolated Sting's "Shape of My Heart"? Why?
Because of the professional. Sorry to cut you off.
No, absolutely. The Professional was one of the most popular hood movies of that era.
That movie is crazy.
The Professional, you know, right? CineMasai. You know, that film introduced people both to that song, Shape of My Heart by Sting, but it also introduced people to a girl named Bjork, if they didn't already watch MTV, through the song Venus is a Boy, which was in the film. Now, what's crazy about that is that fake thug, no love, you catch a slug. That's directly because of the hood used to rent this movie. And it's the same thing where like if you saw there's a song by I hate to talk about him, but Eric Clapton has a song called Pilgrim.
Yeah.
And everybody knows what film that's playing at the end of. During that was an era where everybody would try to flip this goddamn song and put it on rap demos, right? So we know everybody's watching the same movies. Wu-Tang Clan's talking about, yo, where's my killer tape at? Yo, that's how we are. You know, I am the fist of the North Star. Or they use audio from like Crying Freeman. This is another anime that's floating around the hood, you know? So the film and independent film and niche film, it all blew our minds because, oh, wait, I'm not the only person that knows about this. And when you go to a video store and you realize, yo, that film that you wanted is missing, yo, who has it?
Mm-hmm.
This person. So could you give me that number? I don't know if I could do that. Give Sly some money. Yo, you still got this and this? Yeah, then this. Yeah, man, but why you still got it? It's like, cause if I give it back, I'll never get it again. Dude, I could dub it for you. What? I could dub it for you. Real? And then a network builds the kids just the same way back in the days when kids used to lend each other Nintendo games. Nintendo games and talk about secrets and hang out at each other's houses and beat games for them. You know, It's too hard. I've never seen the ending of this game. So your mom would come home from work and there'd be 15 kids in an apartment hunched over the TV trying to watch them beat fucking
Heard that.
Right? So it was the same concept. And like that's how life was. So I started in 2007 for Poison Paragraphs. I did a post. It was Dart's 12 favorite cult films of the internet age, 1996, on. And I did this in 2007 because I was studying the blogosphere and I was like, I have to do something different from everybody else. Everybody's writing about this rapper. Everybody's writing about this event that happened. Yo, let me just do what I know. Like I live film. I live the internet era because I was digging early. I was when I at the Boston Public School System, when I first went to school, English High, my first year there, I was like, ain't nothing going on here because I came from the school, Boston Knight, which is the oldest school in America. And one day I'm walking down the hallway and I hear in a room right next to my homeroom, and it's after school hours. So I go into that room and it's 3 Puerto Rican kids, 2 Dominican kids, 4 white kids, probably 4 of the only white kids in the entire school, and 3 black kids with a teacher in there. And there's 2 computers hooked up, and all I see is text on the screen. It was the text-only internet. They were printing out things because they were like doing hackers movie shit. And I walked in and I was like, what y'all doing? And he explained, he was like, it's probably over your head. He was like, dude, I was programming BASIC when I was fucking 8 years old. What are you talking about? I was like, oh, really? What's that? I was like, it's a this. Like, dude, I had a 300 baud modem when I was a kid. Come on, dog. So they're like, you know about this stuff? I was like, yeah, I know about this stuff. You know about this, and this? Yeah, absolutely. So it was like a scene out of Hackers. So I started hanging out there. And then when the internet, Web 2.0 happens, I was part of the demonstration at English High for the new connection to the Boston Public Library, because I was like one of the main people that like was all up on the internet and like computer shit, So to give you an idea how entrenched I was, so I did this post. I think it was let me see the day. Oh, November 5th, 2007, and I did 12 favorite. So I did Fight Club, which was 1999, City of God 2002, Old Boy 2003, Donnie Darko 2001, Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels 98, Battle Royale.
That's my era. Like everything you're talking about, that's my era. Yeah.
Battle Royale 2000, Memento 2000, Boondock Saints 1999, 12 Monkeys 90, Snatch 2000, and The Way of the Gun 2000, and Ung Bak the Muay Thai Warrior 2003, which I personally spread along the East Coast. I spread that film across the East Coast.
That's a
I would
crazy
play
movie too.
people. I'd have them come over my house. I'd play it for them, and then I'd give them the link where they could buy it. Before I got, it took 2 years to get distribution in North America. 2 years. So I was selling that hand to hand. I was selling that by word of mouth from my brother and my friend group, myself in Boston. So I wrote, I could do 100 of these easy. People like, and at the time of the internet back then, especially in the blogosphere, long form writing was not it. It just wasn't. So I committed myself to that. That's my identity. I could do 100 easy. Like Word, do 100 over the next week. So I did 32 to 23. I did 13 to 32, 33 to 50, 51 to this. And so by the end of the week, I spread it out so that I did Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And on Friday, I finished the list of 100. And it spread like wildfire throughout the internet. And people were getting Netflix accounts based off this. So I added a new feature to my blog, and I had a feature called Darkflix. And I was like, how to better manage your Netflix account. So I told people, hold on to certain films. If you can, take 2 movies, put them in the same sleeve, right? And drop them off at the mailbox Friday morning or Friday afternoon. So they receive them by Monday. And when Tuesday on your queue, when the new films come up, they'll send you the new releases. So they'll be in your mailbox Tuesday. And that changed the game for so many people. And I would tell you all the new movies that are coming out this week, recommend all the new ones that are on Netflix, recommend all the ones that are coming out in stores, and all the movies that were in the theater. So the reason why I came up with this, because my brother and I used to watch G4 TV. And there was a recommendation show on there by a dude named Chris Gore.
Mm-hmm.
We used to scream at the TV because Chris Gore used to just have these weird fucking opinions about movies. He would discount other stuff, and then he liked some trash, right? So it was Darkflix, aka fuck Chris Gore's opinion. That was the title of the script. To give you an idea how like I kind of diversified myself from everybody. My nerdiness and my love of independent film and cult films and how they were created during the internet era. That was like one of the niches I used to, springboard me and separate me from the pack in the blogosphere.
Man, that's so wild. Like, I've always been fascinated with the idea of like cult film and like what exactly makes something a cult film. Cause like, obviously they're not all the same types of movies. It's all about, it's all about the way fans appreciate and spread the word and like build communities and lives around these movies, like it's just like stuff that you might see when it first comes out and nobody, I feel like a pretty popular example of that right now, especially for people around, for everybody really, is Scott Pilgrim. Like when Scott Pilgrim versus the World came out, like that, like I saw Scott Pilgrim when it came out in August of 2000. Like I was about to go to college when Scott Pilgrim versus the World came out. The theater I saw it in was completely fucking packed, like which is crazy because the movie didn't do well, like at all. It very famously bombed. Universal Studios almost went out of business because that movie did so badly, because they were already on the verge of going out of business. And then Fast and the Furious 4 came out, and that movie pulled them, and that movie pulled them from the brink of bankruptcy. You know. But like Scott Pilgrim came out, and it was, it's to this day still a fantastic movie, aged really well, really funny, really insightful, really like visually creative. But like the fans really kept that movie alive for like the last 10, 11, 12 years, and like I know that because I was there. I saw the real life like effects of that. I saw the internet kind of take it to heart. And like that's like that's a cult film.
Yeah. So the weird thing about that one too is that I was introduced to Scott Pilgrim through, again, I've always been going to the bookstore, the comic book store, what have you. Famous comic book store in Boston is Newberry Comics. Right. I go to Newberry Comics, I see Scott Pilgrim, I see the art style. I'm like, oh, that looks kind of dope. I go over to it, Oni Press, I think it's on, right? Brian O'Malley, and I'm like, where do I know that name from? And at the time, I'm one of those people that I read like the serious stuff. Like I'm reading Channel Zero. It has a fucking
Right.
I'm reading Why the Last Man, I'm reading everything like Gully and Dirty, like I look over at my bookshelf, I have DMZ, a bunch of DMZs. I have Transmetropolitan, which actually you read.
Hey, shout out to Spider Jerusalem. Amazing.
Yeah.
I love Transmet.
I feel like I was like a combination of Spider Jerusalem and Maddie Roth from DMZ. Like when I was blogging, like I kind of felt like that was like the two people I kind of channeled, and like pick a black guy. So I was like, that was my niche. But then I see Scott Pilgrim versus the World, and I open it up, and the references to video games, to the X-Men, to all these other things, these like side nerdy conversations where he's explaining to a girl, what the Siege Perilous is in X-Men, and I'm laughing because I'm like, I've seen dudes do that,
Yeah.
like you explain to her what the Siege Perilous is. Like, why would you get on this conversation in the first place?
Yeah, bro.
Yeah. So I started reading Scott Pilgrim, just reading it in the store, and so I got so immersed in it that I got home, and the internet. I was like, there were websites where at one point, I'm not going to name the names because everybody knows them, you can download CBZs and CBRs. So I just downloaded the entire Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. I had a PlayStation 3 at the time. So I would take up the PDFs and I would have them on my PlayStation and I would read them, scroll them up, make them bigger with the controller. Like I use that. I played game. I did that more than I played games.
That's hard.
So my PlayStation 3 just pretty much became like me reading comic books on it, which is hilarious. My niece would read Akira's on it. It was hilarious. So I became enamored with it. And then when the film came out, at first, I was pissed off that they changed certain things and they didn't have certain things and they didn't do this and then it didn't do that. But over maybe a 3-month span, I watched it more and more. And then when it got on cable and I watched it, I understood why they made those changes in the adaptation and the process to adapt it, to translate it. And now when I watch it, I'm like, yo, this was so dope. Like, I love this movie. But at first, I had such high based on the full breadth of the series,
Right.
that it took me a minute to be able to realize, no, they did right by it. And I have to say, anybody who's outside knows this. The game based on that movie.
Crazy. So good.
Probably the all-time greatest video game for film or series ever. That game was fire. And it brought back all the nostalgia from playing River City Ransom and added more elements to it.
So yeah. No, I actually just got the game for my Switch. That was one of the first times I remember hearing the band Anamanaguchi, who I love now, but like, and you're like, back to your earlier point about him like explaining stuff to X-Men, from X-Men to girls. Like, I was the kid who had like the Marvel encyclopedia in my backpack and I would just like read that for fun. Like that was me, like I wasn't like overbearing or anything crazy like that. But like I was the kid in my school who, like, if people needed to know what a movie reference was or like needed to know what a thing was, like I was the person you came to for that, like I was kind of like the one-stop shop in a way. And like, so, so not only am I watching this movie and enjoying it just because like it's a dope movie, even though I maintain the book ending is still better than the movie ending, in my opinion. It's
absolutely. Yeah. But the crazy part is I was always kind of infatuated with Canada too. So like while I'm reading Scott Pilgrim, I know why he's named Scott Pilgrim, because there's a group called Plumlee and they have a song called Scott Pilgrim. So when Scott Pilgrim's wearing a Plumlee shirt, I kind of laugh because I'm like, how many people watching this film have no idea who Plumlee is?
I didn't know.
or like you'll be watching the film and they play music in the background, which is very Canadian, like Broken Social Scene, anthems for a 17-year-old girl. And I'm like, that's a perfect place to put that. People look at me like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, like, and like they're playing in places in Canada that like everybody knows. And they're using inside jokes. And I know the inside jokes because I know people who are from Toronto and live in Canada, of all backgrounds. So I get it. And also I grew up watching, if if you're a Gen Xer, that means you grew up watching a bunch of shows that were set in Toronto or Canada without knowing it. You know,
Right.
I grew up watching different forms of Degrassi, starting on PBS and then on TV. Watch my Secret Identity, and I was wondering why they were talking about grade 8 and grade 9. I'm like, dude, they're in Canada. You watch the episode where and it's funny because there was an episode of My Secret Identity where one of their friends was working for Michie Me and LA Love, and I was just like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. They're Canadian, you know? So it's like, it was hilarious, man. But like, that's how we were introduced to so many things. Film is a bridge and a gateway to so many things, man. And
Yeah.
like, the cult films, they expand your horizons. Because you wouldn't think I'll like this movie. But then it's just like with music. You fall into a K-hole. With jazz, I'm looking for this album. These 4 players are on this album. Now I'm gonna listen to all that stuff. You watch these 2 movies you didn't think you would like, and now you're like, yo, what else is out there? So now you're looking for other stuff with the directors, for other stuff that the actors have been in, other stuff the writers have done.
Yep. Uh-huh. Exactly. And it's like, you see, like, we could go back and forth about this for hours, but like like my experience with that was, I mean, like my father, I feel like I've talked about this a bunch on the show, but I don't think we've talked about it. My father was a doo-wop singer and a roller skater. So like music's been ingrained in my, like, it's been there ever since I was young. So, you know, like he's got a story for everything. So like he's telling me stories about like all these musicians and giving me history and game. And, you know, like while I'm listening to music on my own, I just start digging for stuff, like whether that's like through rap or metal or rock or jazz or pop or whatever, you know, like I just kind of had that inclination to just start digging for shit. And then, you know, like around the time I start using the internet for real, I dig into Apple movie trailers, because obviously movies are like a huge thing for me. But like the reason, see, like, so like Apple movie trailers is kind of like a K-hole that I fell into.
Oh yeah.
Because you know, like that introduced me, like I was already into movies, like don't get me wrong, but like you know, like that opened my eyes to everything that was coming out everywhere. You know, you'd have the trailers for like all the big ass fucking like AAA blockbuster movies, and then all the indie shit. And you know, like I might not be able to get to see all of it, but I at least know it exists, so I can kind of like talk about that stuff and just like know. And maybe, you know, like if I'm lucky enough, like I could find a theater near my place that was like showing one of the indie movies. And thankfully, you know, like I grew up in a town that also had like an independent art house movie theater that was pretty old. So, you know, like they would always show like the big indie movies. So like I had access to that in a way that a lot of other people might not have. But like Apple movie trailers was the place where I did a lot of my digging, and where my love of movies really started to like accelerate and like exponentially accelerate. I was just like consuming everything I could find, you know, like, and you know, like, and of course, like with the music shit, like that of course compounds with file sharing, and you know, like Shazam and LimeWire, and that's a whole other conversation, you know. Like,
because here's the thing, right? I'm glad you brought up Apple movie trailers, because when I did Dartflix, I used to use Apple movie trailers, and then there was this other site from overseas, and I used to combine them, right? So I would have the indie films, the blockbusters, upcoming international movies. And the reason I did that was a shout out, because remember, it's the blog era, it's the internet age, right? So people like, yo, what's that? How can I see this movie, Adulthood, if it's not in theaters? You know what I'm getting at. How am I going to see that? How am I going to see, Rolling with the Nine? How can I see 4, 3, 2, 1 if it's not airing here? How am I going to see this movie, Shank, if it's not going to be airing here? Fish Tank. How can I see this film? So what happened was people go on the internet, and somebody would always source, you know, the file. So people go download it and they watch it. So they have a screener, you know? And the problem was that it still exists, I feel, to this day, is that we should have more access to films in Canada, in the UK, you know, in Europe.
yeah,
Like, there's no reason why we had to wait so long to see Revolver from Guy Ritchie. You know, like I saw Revolver on the internet probably more like 18 months before I was able to rent it. You know, So like that's what I used to do, and I used to like always pull up these trailers, and like I would send links, and I would talk about movies that were in development in theaters. I mean, at different studios and stuff like that. But like the wild thing too is that the way that opened people up to how the film industry worked, and also to how stupid the problem of piracy is. Because there's a very simple way to end piracy. Make the goddamn thing available for us to watch.
Like, come on, man.
Very simple.
Jesus.
We'd pay. I want to see that. You know, like why is it so hard? And then the other thing was like it was with television too. I think about how many shows like for example, Top Boy.
Shout out to Top Boy.
I seen Top Boy and Luther as soon as they aired because I had connections in the UK. But how long was it before they were made readily available through BBC America or whatever distributor here? It was stupid. And then they finally got the hint later on when like you had Gangs of London. They were like, we're not going to do that stupid shit anymore. If we watch Gangs of London over here, the Americans are going to be able to see it, you know? Because why are we going to deny the audience? And I feel like the pandemic kind of got people thinking about, yo, we're doing this all wrong. And also the pandemic also changed a lot of things in terms of like film. Because for the first stretch of the pandemic, we were able to get stuff at home.
Yeah. Especially with the HBO Max shit. Yeah.
Yeah, we were able to get stuff on demand at home. And then they were like, all right, now you guys got to go to the theater. Wear a mask. We don't care what you have to do. Go to the theater. But we want to talk about film and the experience and talk about the disconnect in terms of like growing an audience. Let's talk about Christopher Nolan, right? And you know where I'm going with this.
I do.
The rollout for Tenet. Now, we're not stupid. We know why Christopher Nolan wanted Tenet in theaters. We want loud noises. We want to do sound design so that you can't hear audio and dialogue. So you're going to try to read lips. You know, you're going to try to bring a notebook to the theater and write things down that you saw. And you got to watch it again and again and again and again and again and again to catch it. And the last thing Christopher Nolan wants for his experience and his idea, this fucking big circle jerk that he has in his head for his art, is that I want you to go to the theater and watch it again and again, bring friends. Dude, this shit is not like Memento in 2000. The world's completely different. Like, we can enjoy Tenet and all the mind fuckery if we watch it at home and can pause.
Go to the bathroom, make some food.
Go to the bathroom.
You know, like
analyze it. You know,
right.
Watch the scene again and again, watch the movie again, figure out where everything connects. When she jumps in the water, what happened over here? That child, is that child this person? The name is used here, is the name used here? How come he's so concerned about this woman? You know, why is this person his friend? How come when he goes into this, who's that person he's shooting at? Like all these things that happen in Tenet, it would have still worked if we watched it at home.
Right.
Because we could watch it again and again and again. You're just not getting the money again and again. But it doesn't change the experience. And so that you could have dialogue, you know, subtitles up, doesn't take away from the film. Matter of fact.
No, it doesn't.
Renting certain movies, when they do that on purpose, is having subtitles so you don't miss any of the dialogue.
Right.
So that's another thing that always gets me. People have this idea of what the experience has to be on their side. But the beauty of cult films, it tells you, you put out this movie thinking it would do this, and it became way bigger by flopping. You know, think about if you had I'm using air quotes, successful run of Empire Records. It would have been forgotten about by now.
Right.
The fact Empire Records is the film it is, and people love it so much, is because it flopped at the box office and found an audience and kept finding an audience. Same case with what's the name of the film? Everybody was in it. It's based in 1976. Everybody's in that shit. Fry Little Piggies.
Dazed and Confused. Okay, yeah.
Dazed and Confused is a big film because it flopped. You know, Freaks and Geeks is the super influential show because it didn't do well. My So-Called Life got canceled. You don't cancel My So-Called Life, it takes away the demand for it, you know, and
Right.
people are going to discover it. Like some of the best things didn't last past 2 seasons. And
Right.
like I have flash drives upon flash drives. That's one. I have I have a laptop I have 3 laptops and a table in front of me. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and there's one in another computer. I have seven flash drives, SanDisk, PNY, and then in front of my TV over there, I have a lineup of 15 flash drives. All of those are TV shows, movies, documentaries that I have in case the cable goes out, in case I don't have, in case something happens, so I can watch it on my TV or put it into my laptop and watch it, or I can't stream it. Now,
Yeah.
here's the other thing that pisses me off about where we're going and why we have a WGA writer's strike and why it pisses me off, but I understand even though this was going to be the year I was finally going to be able to write something. I loved Let the Right One In on Showtime.
Oh, the show? Okay.
Yeah, the new adaptation, Let the Right One In. The father, the daughter, the next door neighbors, the wife's a cop, the son, little black kid, into magic. Like the way they figured out to adapt that to the new audience and then bring that new story, I love the way they adapted it. Shit got canceled after 1 season. And like it just got canceled like right at the winter, right? So it's spring now, going into summer. I would watch it over and over again. I would watch it over and over again. Oh, I think 10 episodes, or maybe 8 or 10 episodes. I'll watch it over and over again. And then one day I realized on my smart TV, because you have a queue, right? You have like your favorites. It's gone from my favorites. And so when I go to the Showtime app, it's not available to use. So when I go to search on my smart TV, the only thing that comes up is the trailer. And I'm like, why is that? So then I Google, and it turns out it got canceled. So since it got canceled, they're not even going to have it available for anybody to watch it.
Yeah, they just pulled it.
Yeah, they just pulled it. And I'm like, so could I go to Showtime on my other TV and then watch it there? Why would you pull it from the smart TV? And that's one of the issues, right? But here's the thing. When we talk about cult films and how things grow, that now makes the demand for it. Now people are going to go online and they're going to try to download all the episodes and put it on a flash drive and have it. You know, TMZ. I mean, I talked about DMZ, right?
Yeah,
DMZ,
you did.
They adapted DMZ, right? Who did it? Homegirl adapted DMZ. She was supposed to also do like other stuff for DC, but it didn't happen.
Not Ava DuVernay.
I think yes. I think Ava
Okay.
DuVernay
Yeah.
adapted DMZ, and I didn't like it because in the adaptation, what they did was now me being a journalist and me being somebody who loves, we've already established this, who loves world building, who loves backstory.
Yeah.
They took all that shit away and they made it so that you're immersed into the character and their lives because they felt that if you're the viewer and you're watching it from a journalistic standpoint where the person is kind of removed from everything that's happening, even though they're involved in it, you're not going to be as immersed in it. We want you to have the immersion as opposed to a top-down view where you can see everything play out. But what happens is the byproduct is, I'm sure, I don't know if you saw it or not.
No? I didn't. No.
Okay, cool. So the byproduct is that shit happens and you don't know who anybody is. And you don't understand the stakes. Like, you're immersed in the woman is looking for her son. She knows these people. This is the way the world is. These people are beefing with these people. But then all of a sudden, you don't realize the reason these people are doing all this stuff is because of the army. So no one talks about the army. And then when you see the army, you're like, how are they the threat? Because you don't know shit about them. No one's talking. It's the same issue I have with, and this is going to be one last thing I'm going to bring up. It's also world building and doing the extra step. Zombie films are overdone. You know, in order to do the zombie genre right, you have to figure out new wrinkles. You have to figure out a new threat. You have to make the zombies evolve. You have to do some extra world building. You have to add some extra layers because we've seen it all by now, right? So I loved Zombieland because they did extra layers. They created humor in it. The zombie kill of the week, the steps, you know, double tap, all these other things.
Yeah, Zombieland's great. Love it.
stretch, all that shit. In Zombieland 2, they have an opportunity to do extra world building because what they do, they're like, all right, the zombies evolved, right? You have this zombie, this zombie, this zombie, and this zombie. And then they run into people like them. What doesn't happen in that film is that there was no exchange of information, even to one-up each other. If you have one zombie that's smarter than everybody else in the herd, if you need to survive that era, what tricks, what techniques have you devised to be able to ascertain which one that is from the herd? So you can be able to switch up your attack, or your defense. No one brought that shit up once. And I'm like, but they're alive, and they said they've seen them in the field. Why wouldn't you bring that up? Because they were trying to warn each other, right? Why not do that? And then there were certain other things that, like, yo, they dropped the ball on so much. So I left the theater angry. Because I'm like, I don't want to see a part 3. Because they didn't fucking do the steps necessary to make me care. And that's another thing. Immersion. In order to have somebody immerse themselves in a story, you have to have them suspend belief, right? But you also have to care. How that happens with a different audience and different individuals varies. The shit that I like and the things that I'm going to like and things that are going to make me, watch a show, may not work for you. May not work for her, may not work for him.
Right.
But find a way to find that common balance, And then some stuff just ain't for everybody. Everything ain't for everybody. I can't get into Mad Men. I don't care what's happening to anybody on screen. But I can watch Session because I want to see what bad things happen to everybody on screen.
Right, yeah.
Same thing for industry. Nobody has any redeeming qualities. Some are more likable than others, but I basically want to see what happens to the people. But when I don't care what happens to anyone, I stop watching. I don't have to. I just have to care.
Right. And to your point, I feel like this is kind of like a cliche example at this point, but like Atlanta's like that, like Atlanta, like not only do you, or at least for me, like not only do I care about the characters on Atlanta, like to your point about world building, like that's like they went to pretty ridiculous lengths to make that Atlanta like to immerse you in their version of Atlanta, like even though season 3 is kind of iffy, it's not the best, but like there was never a time when I was watching the show where I was like, this is not a well-established world. Like I understand what's going on at all times. So like even though I didn't like the 3rd season very much as a whole, like obviously there's really good parts, but like Atlanta's sense of place and sense of personality is so strong that it made me want to watch it no matter what. On top of the fact that Ern and Darius and Van and Paperboy are all interesting fucking characters, like that's what I love so much about that show. And then to go even further back to your point about stuff getting taken off the streamers, like of course the HBO Max thing happened last year where they wiped their whole fucking backlog. And one of my favorite recent shows of the last like 10 or 15 years, I'm not sure if you've heard of it, it's a Cartoon Network original called Infinity Train.
Oh, dude, have you not read about Infinity Train?
No, I haven't seen you talk about it at all, but like, son, I wrote a whole piece about it and published it myself, and the people shared it because like I compared it to Saw, bro. Like real quick before you say what you want to say. Obviously they took all of Infinity Train off HBO Max. You can't find it. Like it took it off HBO Max. It's not on YouTube. It's not anywhere. The only way to watch Infinity Train is to buy the DVDs, and they only put out DVDs of the first 2 books.
Yes.
So I literally have the first 2 books of Infinity Train on my dresser right now. Like nobody can take that shit away from me. Like Infinity Train, one of my best friends, Spence, I love you, Spence. Shout out to Spence if he's listening. He put me on because he showed me the original short that aired in like 20 whatever year it was.
They got it. They got it on. They got it green.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So like I saw that, and then they made the show. And I started watching the show, and I told my partner, I was like, yo, Desiree, like, this shit is crazy. Like I watched it and I'm like, this is fucking crazy. It's been so long since I've watched something that really had me so engrossed. And it's only 10, and then the first season is 10 episodes, 10 minutes long. It's the season is literally the length of a movie. You can watch the whole thing in less than 2 hours. this is what I tell everybody when I tell them to go watch the show. But like, like I watched the whole thing. I watched the third season when it got to Max, and it was a huge deal. And then the fourth season happens. Oh, I guess I should back up. So for anybody who doesn't know, Infinity Train was a show about this big ass train that like it goes on for infinity, and every train car has its own little world inside of it. There'll be like a world of nothing but dogs, or like a world that's like nothing but like a big ass jungle gym, or like a forest, or some sort of like concert venue type shit, like. So like every season of Infinity Train follows a character who gets put on the train for a reason, because like they have to like go through some sort of life change, like, and that's what makes it like Saw, because like that's what Jigsaw was doing to people, so like, and like there's like lore. I'm not gonna go into what
it's so much.
But it's so good. It's so well told. Like there's so much going on, but because the show is so short, they got to get really smart about how they tell the story and how they build the world. They built that world so well that it's incredibly immersive, and it gets to the point where it's basically like an anthology series where every single season follows a different character. And but like the thing that's, because usually when you're following a show like that, the thing that's familiar is the characters. But in this case,
they take away from you every season.
Right. So, like, so like here, instead of it being the characters, it's the world that's familiar. We understand that we're on the train. It's really like they went through it and we're like, what's the smartest way we can make this show? It's
the thing that's dope about it makes you challenge your own idea of what makes you like something, right? Because you're like, I watch for the arc of the individual. After the first season ends, you realize, all right, now let's see what happens to someone else on this train. And then you realize by the third season, it ain't even about the characters on the train. It's about them giving you a glimpse into what's happening on the train itself.
Right? And they're gradually revealing shit, like like how at the end of season 1 we find out that 1-1 was actually the conductor of the train, and you find out about the lady who was on there who was trying to bring her dead husband back, and like then it's just like it just gets deeper and deeper and deeper in these like really organic and natural. It's just such a smartly constructed show, man. Like
and then immerses you. And when it ended, it broke my fucking heart. But the other part is that when they announced it, because all the issues that have been going on with animation in different studios and stuff like that, right? And the delays that happened both on Netflix, everywhere going on.
Netflix especially,
especially. And they were just like, yo, it's ending. It's over. It's not being renewed. We don't know if it's going to be picked up by anybody else, but also it's being pulled off of all the streaming services. And this is the last day you can watch it. So I did this whole tweet thread talking about how this is a show you need to watch. It's on here right now. The last day it's going to be on is here. And I'm telling people, so every time it came on, I would tweet about like Infinity Train. When people talk about the most influential animated shows of the recent eras, I would include it alongside, everything, people always talk about regular show. They're always going to talk about like Steven Universe. They're going to talk about
Adventure Time.
And I'm like, Gumball should be in that conversation.
Definitely. Love Gumball.
Infinity Train is definitely in that conversation because and I think also at some point people are going to add Craig of the Creek to that list.
Oh hell yeah. Shout out to Craig of the Creek. So good.
Because it's the same thing like we were talking earlier about like cartoons and how there's references that you don't get and then there's references that you get. And it's like, oh, so this is made for Gen Xers. Animaniacs, when Animaniacs first came out in the early 90s, they would drop all these references, and the older kids would be laughing, and the little kids would be looking back like, we don't
Animaniacs.
Even know. So, like, it was kind of it's kind of that thing. But Infinity Train is easily one of those shows that's going to go on to be one of the most influential, along like Rick and Morty on that level. They're going to be super influential to future generations of creators, animators, writers, being Puppy Cat. I think that one too. Yep. So like all those joints are going to be super influential to the generations coming forward who are going to be creators and animators and showrunners.
100%. And I would throw in something like the Lego movie with that too, because the first time I saw the Lego movie, like, not to dwell on it too long, but like Infinity Train and the Lego movie were two things when I saw them where I had that thought where I was like, oh, people 15 years younger than me are going to be citing this when they're getting interviewed, like, oh, what's the movie that made you want to make movies? The Lego movie, Infinity Train, like Rick and Morty, even with all the bullshit they got going on, like these things. What?
I mean, absolutely. For my generation, the things that turned us on and made us the people we are today to even care about these things were being kids that saw stuff like Wizards, rock and roll, heavy metal, like all those type of films. Rock and Roll is a film that is unique to me because it premiered in Boston, spread through word of mouth, came on cable. We had to find it on VHS tape. If you tried to rent it, if you found a video store that had it, they didn't have another copy. You could, if you wanted it, you had to spend $120 and buy it directly from Nelvana in Canada. And then it went out. And like, that's the thing too, right? How stuff spreads. Movies like The Point. If you didn't know about The Point and you explained The Point to somebody, they stare at you like you have three heads. I saw a cartoon when I was a little kid back in Boston. We had this thing before cable existed. You had pay TV. And we have the Prudential, and they used to send a signal down, and you had a pay TV signal. There was this network. It was called Star TV, Star Case, and then came Preview TV. And you could get movies that were in the theater or before they hit cable as they were in theaters in your home. But you had to subscribe, right? And being in Boston, where we have Harvard, where we have MIT, we have Northeastern, we have all these communication colleges, Wentworth Institute of Technology, people found out ways to hijack the signal and get the TV shows for free. So what I'm telling you is I saw movies like Grindel, and from 1981, which people are like, what? Never heard of that. I saw that when I was a child. So I'm growing up and I'm seeing all these movies and all these shows and all these cartoons, animated shows, and then I'm going out like Water Babies. And I'm like, yo, you remember this? And then it's like, what? I never heard of that. So you get to the point where you run into somebody who else has seen it, and then it takes years before it gets to a point where like, yo, I've seen a copy of it. The Mouse and His Child, The Plague Dogs, The Secret of Nim was everywhere, but like
Nim was crazy.
Animated shows and animated films that were very niche, had very niche audiences. And then you get to college and you discover, yo, people make money because they found these things. They recorded them to VHS. They're bootlegging them and they're selling them. And then when the internet came up, what happened was they set up shop. Oh, you haven't seen Force 5 since you were a kid? I got the whole run of Force 5 on VHS tape. You can buy it. I'll ship it to you. Oh, you remember G.I. Joe? I found this dude in Texas who recorded the entire run of G.I. Joe. Just tell me what season you want. You want specialized episodes? You can special order them and send them to me. So the internet opened up all these opportunities, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that we retain these memories of things, and we have this different level of nostalgia as Gen Xers and then going beyond. If you came up on the internet, your nostalgia is different than the generation before. And the generation nostalgia is different because I didn't have Cartoon Network growing up. Cartoons came on at a specific time or during the holiday. They went off. They were not on at night. It wasn't 24/7, but my nieces and nephews grew up at a time where they had on demand.
Yeah.
So if That's So Raven, they missed it. They could watch the last 5 episodes of That's So Raven right there, right now. Whereas if you miss Martin, you better hope somebody taped it and you go over and watch it. Because you know how long it's going to take for that rerun to come back on?
At least a month.
So it's a different way to process things. And I think people don't realize that, man. And like, again, with cult films, sometimes it took years for these things to spread and find a new audience.
Decades even.
Yeah.
Yo, I actually have a really great example of that because so I'm trying to remember how to start this story. So there's a YouTuber I watch. His name's Movie Bob. He's super dope. Been watching Bob for years. He had put me on to this movie called Future Cops. I'm sure you've heard of Future Cops.
Yeah.
So I think I might have talked about Future Cops like really early on here, but just in case, Future Cops is an unlicensed Street Fighter movie that was made in I believe it's Japanese. I think Future Cops is Japanese. But long story short, it's like a bunch of Street Fighter characters are like cops in the future, and like they're going after Bison. Bison, no, Bison winds up going back in time to go kill a judge who's about to sentence him to death while he's a little kid. Dart's laughing right now. Y'all can't see it, but but like, so like like Terminator style, they send a bunch of the Street Fighter people back to go protect this judge while he's a kid. And they send Ryu, Vega, who's not a hero. They make him a hero in the movie for some reason. So it's like a bunch of like the Street Fighter characters. They go back in time to get into this like screwball high school comedy type shit with like a kid and his teenage sister, and like the teenage sister but turns out to be Chun-Li or some shit. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. I had never I never would have heard of this shit if I wasn't watching some random 35 40-year-old white man's YouTube video. So the only reason I found it was because I went on YouTube and I went on YouTube and searched for it. I had to dig for like a while, and I managed to find the full movie on YouTube. And I hit my man Corey, shout out to Corey, my roommate at the time, or one of my roommates at the time in college. And I was like, yo, do you want to watch this Future Cops movie with me? I've never seen this shit before. I told him what it was about. And like we're all on top of that shit. And he's like, yeah, bro, sign me up. So we sit and we watch Future Cops. And it was just like, it's easily the most bizarre and fun thing I've ever seen in my life. Like it's like you could tell they had no bread to make this shit. Like there's a scene at the end of the movie where Blanca's in the movie. Somebody gets turned into Blanca, and they have a fight at the end. And we all, and like Street Fighter fans know that Blanca turns into a ball when he does some of his moves. So in order to simulate him turning into a ball, they would have him like hunched up, and then in the next shot, somebody from off screen would throw a beach ball. And that's supposed to be the guy. It's that type of movie, just like, cult films like that shit had to have been at least like 30 or 40 years old at that point, maybe even more than that, and like stuff like that persists because it connects with people. And like Dart said before, it doesn't, like it's not this, like, not to say that hugely successful things don't connect with people, because obviously they do, or else they wouldn't be successful. But like it's different when it's like, oh, like this thing, you have to go find this thing in order to watch it and appreciate it. Another perfect example is How to Blow Up a Pipeline, which I've been talking about a lot for the last month. Like the government doesn't want you to watch that movie. Like they put, like they were concerned that people might actually try to go blow up a pipeline, and they pulled it out of theaters. There were very few times to watch it, like that's going to be a cult movie. And I'm not, and like recency bias is recency bias, but I think it's fantastic. And it's like timely, it's really thoughtful, it's super relevant and really well made. It's super entertaining and informative and thoughtful. Just a really fucking great movie all the way around. But but to your point, like that scarcity is what makes something a cult movie. Like that's what makes, like it makes people want to go find it. And it makes people, like it gives you that incentive and that like sense of edge. Like, oh man, like, it's like when you were a little kid and it's like, oh, like mom and dad don't want me to smoke a cigarette. I want to smoke a cigarette now, even more now, because I couldn't do it. Like it's the exact same thing.
The wild thing too is that film introduces us to so many concepts and opens our minds to so many things. I said before that it could be like an entryway, like a gateway to other things.
Absolutely.
But like, to give you an example, I didn't know what an anti-hero was until I watched, again, I was talking about Star TV. Star TV is, I think, in 1981, how I first saw a movie called Escape from New York, what my older brother did. And when it ended, I was very confused because Snake Plissken didn't try to save everybody, but he's the hero. He's the dude they picked, right, to save everybody. But he switched the tapes. And he's walking away and he's tearing the tape out and he tosses the tape and he goes off. And I'm like, why do you do that? Ain't he the hero? I was like, no. My big brother explains that he's an anti-hero. I was like, what the hell is an anti-hero? I didn't say hell. I'm like, but what's an anti-hero? And he explained to me the concept of an anti-hero. And when you're a child, especially if you're born in 1975, TV shows, cartoons, programming for children gave you a binary. Good, bad.
Yeah.
You know? But it never gave you any in-between options. Just like back in the days, you had a joystick. You went left, right, front,
up, down. Yeah.
But when you get older, you realize, dude, there's 8 directions on the joystick. Whip. And then when you get older, like when I got a little older, my brother introduced me to D&D. And when he introduced me to D&D, he told me about, alignment.
Yeah.
And I discovered chaotic good. And I'm just like, that's a possibility. And so these are the things that film open you up to. And then when you lose those binaries, you get to be a person who, when you're older and you watch a Star Wars movie, where you're introduced to the concept of a dude who's an arms dealer who deals
smuggler.
And says, yeah, you got these people fighting the rebels over here. You got the Galactic Empire fighting over here. We just trying to live, dog. We just trying to live through this whole thing because the Galactic Empire is going to have another name. The rebels are going to have another name in 10 years, but we're still going to be here trying to live through this war.
Right.
I remember sitting in the theater thinking, how come nobody ever brought that shit up before? Nobody ever brought that shit up before. Like, that's crazy. I was like, yo. And then, like, when I watch a Star Wars movie and it's like, of the Andor type, and it's just like, oh, everybody dies. And I'm just like, this brings me back to when I was a little kid and I first saw The Empire Strikes Back, which is the best film of that trilogy. And I was just,
agreed.
yo, everything's down. We got to come back, But it's the best film because when The Empire Strikes Back happened, Empire Strikes Back, right? But then, like, when The Return of Jedi happens, now I don't know how everybody feels, but I feel this way. I saw it when I was 8 going on 9. When you see it as a teenager, it looks like Luke Skywalker just hit one of those Super Mario Brother invincibility stars. He can't be stopped. Right. He walks. Yeah, we can win with him. And I was just like, dog, why did I love this? But when I watched like stuff like Star Wars, when they changed it around and they moved shit around, and I was like, oh yeah, I can get into this. Then they fuck it up when they do like The Last Skywalker or whatever the hell that shit was called. What was that called?
Oh, the last one. I think it was not The Last Jedi, because The Last Jedi is my favorite of that new trilogy. That was the second one. The last one was like it was like the Skywalker. Rise of Skywalker. Yeah, nah. Yo, you go first.
It's like somebody pulled in a bus, a brick truck full of money. They unloaded the pallets of money, and then somebody set the shit on fire.
Oh my! Yo, son, I saw that movie with Jerry. We screened it together. Like for anybody who doesn't know, Jerry Barrow, my OG. Yeah. I talk about him a bunch on here. We screened that together, and I walked out and I told him I told him I saw that for free and I want my money back. I thought that shit was awful. Because I love The Last Jedi because The Last Jedi did. The Last Jedi was trying to like clear the slate and like do something new. God forbid anybody do anything new with fucking Star Wars. I love The Last Jedi because it set everything up to be like, oh, we're gonna move away from the Skywalkers and like establish some new shit. And then the other one, they listened to all the piss baby edgelords and they were like, oh, well, you got your Skywalkers back, and it's like,
yo, I was basically they're like, search your feelings. Who are your family? Nobody. That's right. Because the Force is not fucking hereditary. All right, anybody can channel the Force.
That's the whole point of the point of the fucking Force. Thank you.
You
Yeah,
know,
you get it.
like three levels. I'm like, get that shit out of here. And the beauty of it was that when it ended, there was this little kid that was using the Force. I was like, oh, it's gonna be dope because it's gonna be people coming from every section and stuff like that, becoming the new, the new people to fight. And then all of a sudden, no, she's part of a Jedi heritage, and it's the Jedi legacy. And they turned Homie into just her sidekick, her whiny sidekick. Ray, Ray. His girlfriend, were they on a break? Like, what happened there? Like that's like he cheated or some shit. I was like, what's going on with this movie?
Oh man.
And the thing was that they had so many different options to go with. Like one thing I've always wanted to do is like if I ever got an opportunity, I have friends that work in the Star Wars world and they work on comic books and they do the novelizations. If there's any opportunity I ever get in the Star Wars universe, I really want to work for Marvel. But if there's any opportunity I want to do in the Star Wars universe, I want to make something about gray Jedi. The Jedi who seceded from the other Jedi, and they were like, y'all got too many fucking staunch rules. Y'all too afraid of the fucking of the being corrupted by the dark side. Like we're not going to be corrupted by the dark side, and we think the Jedi's are failures because how come they keep getting their ass kicked? If the Jedi is so bad, how come it took one dude, Darth Vader, to wipe them all out with help? One dude. The Jedi is so supposed to be so powerful. Like they should have been some gray Jedi that should have been able to stand against them. So I want to do a story where it's gray Jedi and like their Vader is hunting these guys down to get rid of them because they're the hardest Jedi to fight because they're not afraid to force choke you. They're not afraid to do all the dirty stuff. They're not afraid to go to the wall to fight you, and you have to dump them. So like I always want to do something about the Great Jedi. I was like, did anybody ever talk about the Great Jedi? I was like, oh, good. So I have carte blanche to do whatever I want. Like they were the last vestige because that's why everybody else went to hide. The reason why everybody who survived got the chance to hide is because Vader and his forces were busy trying to wipe out the Great Jedi who was still fighting.
Yeah, no, it's like because like of course like the obvious analog to that is Anakin making the transition to Darth Vader, but like those movies are imperfect. We don't have to talk about them. But like I mean like I love Revenge of the Sith. I think Revenge of the Sith is a great fucking movie. I think like there's 10 minutes of Attack of the Clones that's some of my favorite Star Wars moments ever. But like, like there never was a time where they really, like there's never been a Jedi who didn't immediately become a Sith Lord that did that type of shit, and it's just like there's so many different places they could take it, but they were just like, oh yeah, no, we're just gonna everything's always the Skywalkers, always, forever. Love us, please give us your money. And it's
because
like,
they were stuck on the idea of binaries. That's why Han couldn't shoot first. Why the fuck couldn't Han shoot first? Han couldn't shoot first because Han was a scoundrel, but he changed his ways when he joined the people you need the most are the grimy motherfuckers. That's why when the other joint opened up and it started out, there were like 6 bodies caught in like the first 3 minutes. It was like I want to talk about another cult film, RoboCop 2. RoboCop 2 opens, you know where I'm going. RoboCop 2 opens with just violence happening. There's no opening credits. They don't tell you who's in the movie. It just starts.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait, are they gonna stop and have a credit scene? Are they gonna have an opening credit scene? Oh no, this is violence. Just people dying and drugs. This is doing drugs and robots. Okay, all right, cool.
And that was before that was the norm too. That's kind of the norm now, where like the credits happen at the end of the movie. But like, yeah. Anyway, please continue.
Yeah. So like those binaries happen, and it fucks up everything because you're stuck to these things, and this is how you get toxic fans because they feel like they have to adhere to these tight rules of what is and isn't. And if you don't know them and if you don't adhere to them, it's not real, it's not canon. Bullshit. It should always be a thing where it's like, we want to reflect society and we want to respect you as thinking people. You know,
Right.
like we want to respect when they said, "Hey, we think you guys can think for yourselves. You can understand that everything isn't black and white and left and right and cut and dry, and there's gray in the middle." And they were like, "No, go back to the way it was before." You know, where are all these women Jedi coming from? Where are these black
Right.
Jedi coming from? That didn't happen. How come everyone isn't speaking with a British accent? When you know better, you do better. Like now, there are kids that are actually into Star Wars because there were generations and generations of kids that saw that shit was like, that ain't for me. Now look at all the creators who write, you know, and create for the Star Wars universe that are making it better and opening it up and making the possibility bigger. So now if you go to a con, you see little brown children and Asian children who see themselves in Star
Yeah.
Wars.
And women and queer folks, bro.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's where we should all be headed. It's like Star Trek was like, hey, we know where to go. And Star Wars was like, hey, go there. We're gonna do.
Right.
And then when people were just like, hey, this is what we should have been doing the whole time, and now those old motherfuckers need to die off, who are hijacking the fandom and making it super toxic, you know, they just want to be like, we want it the way we want it. It's like, but you have to understand, man, times change. It's not 1977 anymore. It's not 1983 anymore. Thank God, because now we have Wi-Fi.
Right. You know, oh man. Like I said before, Dart, we could sit here and talk about this for hours. But like, you know, to kind of bring all of this home, you know, like you're someone both as a journalist, as an archiver, as an archivalist, as, you know, just like a personality and someone with a really great eye for fact checking and very strong opinions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you've seen so much change from you've seen so much change over the course of the last like 30-40 years.
Oh yeah.
And, you know, like especially after this conversation we had, you know, like before we hopped on, I was reading your interview you did with Abe Beam over at Passion of the Weiss. You know, shout out to Abe, shout out to Jeff, shout out to Passion of the Weiss.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
all amazing. You know, like, and you had mentioned there that, you know, like there was a bit in there where like early on where Abe had kind of talked to you about the fact that you're like not necessarily a critic, and that you don't necessarily like linger on like the issues of the day. You know, like
No.
that's kind of, you know, like that's like not your MO. But the thing is, like, you're invested in this stuff. You know, like you're sitting here talking to me about Infinity Train and Craig of the Creek and stuff like that. You know, like it's not like you know, it's not like you're not engaging with it. You just, that's just not like your professional focus. You
No.
know, like,
People that do that.
what'd you say?
I said there are people that do that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, like, you know where you stand, you know what you want to do. And, you know, I guess like before I ask my final question, like, just like as someone who's seen the music, cinematic, journalistic, and general culture paradigm shift,
Mm-hmm.
like, how do you manage to stay up on, I mean, like, maybe not stay up on everything, because it's not like you're, you know, like I don't think you think about it like that, but just like has there ever been a time where you've seen a whole bunch of new things happen and be like, I feel like I don't belong here, or like this isn't for me, or like I don't see anything here that speaks to me, and like do you ever come up against that, and like how do you work through it, if you have?
Oh,
I
absolutely.
guess.
Um, so if you read my Medium throughout the years, I think I started my Medium in 2014 probably. Um, I realized that I hit a wall where a lot of things that were happening I just didn't care about, and I realized because the thing is with the 24-hour news cycle and being on real-time social media and wanting to be a influencer or whatever, or be out there, people always feel like they have to sound off on everything and give their opinion about everything. And some things I just don't care enough about to like immerse myself in so I can give a good opinion. And then like there's some aspects of music where I feel like, here's the thing about music too. When you grow up, when I grew up, there were a bunch of rock writers and black music experts who hated rap, who covered rap. and they hated it. And you could tell that they abhorred it by what they wrote about it. And I was like, I'm never going to be that person. I'm never going to be that old guy who's going to sit here telling all the kids what they do sucks and they missed everything that was good. Because I have a saying, every year is someone's 1988. My 88 was 1988. You know, I'm talking Public Enemy, Steps of Sonic, MC Light, Eric B. and Rakim, Salt and Pepper, Run DMC, the Jungle Brothers, you know, De La Soul puts out their first 2 singles, you know, like I was outside for that. We're talking about the day, June 20th, 1988 is the day that New Edition and Bobby Brown drops. The week before, Guy puts out their first album. I'll Be Sure, everybody's out, right? So that's a great time for me. But here's the thing. Everybody wasn't born, everybody wasn't alive, everybody wasn't outside that year. 1988 for somebody else is 1994. Someone else is 95. Someone else is 97. For someone else is 99. Someone else is 2003, 2007 now.
Yeah.
And I have to keep that in mind. So I'm not going to go out of my way and talk about what's wrong with X, Y, and Z, why this sucks, rail against that, because it's not made for me and I'm not supposed to get it. I'm not the audience. And it's the same way my older brother laughed when he first heard DOS Effects. And my older brother's only 6 years older than me. And I was like, you don't think so? That's weird. And then you understand the concept of micro generations. You know, every 3 to 5 years there's a sea change. Every 3 to 5 years something changes, especially in urban music. But especially, we got to keep in mind that past the late 80s, early 90s, information technology doubled in speed between 6 to 9 months. Right. So if we recognize that and understand that, then we already know that the way people socialize, the way people are going to interact with different information and things is going to change. So keeping that in mind and knowing that I've been on Twitter, this is my 15th year going on being on Twitter, I'm not going to have the same thing that affects these kids and the things that they go through and the things that they see is not going to filter down to me. I wasn't on Vine. I didn't get on TikTok early. You know, it took me a minute to figure out what was actually happening on YouTube, you know? So understanding all of that, I knew that I didn't have to comment on everything and I didn't have to give my opinion on everything. And it was perfectly fine for me to just be like, I don't know, I don't get it. I'll let you explain it to me, you know? So, and when I saw things change, I had to realize that I process things differently because how I was raised and how I see the world and how my mind works. And that's not the same for everybody. So I can point out issues and bring things into context. I can give you context. I can give you my perspective and leave it alone from there. And you can explain things to me from there and we can actually have a dialogue, which is what I prefer. I want you to teach me some shit that I don't understand because I want to understand it. But at the same time, I know I don't have to try to run around with the young kids because the dances they doing is for them. It's to entertain them. It's the culture they came up with. Well, I'm not going to shit on the culture they came up with. We had our own culture, and the older people shit on us. Don't be that person.
Right. You really don't want to be that person ever. No. You know, and like you're someone who's like extremely passionate about the stuff that you love and making sure that it's preserved in the right ways. Mm-hmm. You know, and that's really important. You know, like like every generation has people who are like super, not even protective, but just like thorough. Yeah. You know, like there's a difference between being protective and being thorough.
I think that the lines I don't want to go across is that there are people that are so protective that they don't want any critique of the era. And I think that's fucking stupid because the problem with nostalgia is that a lot of people, the nostalgia erases everything that was wrong, everything that was bad, everything that should have been done better. Like, I love movies of the 80s, but I gotta tell you, I can't watch some of them shits anymore. Like, I used to love The Last Dragon, but I can only hear so many like references to Asians and fucking up honorific suffixes and stuff like that without Winston. I can't watch. My brother and I and our friends, we used to watch this movie. I'm sure you've heard of it. Big Trouble in Little China.
Yeah.
Big Trouble in Little China anymore. You know, there's a lot of movies that I liked back in the day when I was young I can't really enjoy like I used to. 16 candles, like, dude, that's a rape scene, you know? Like, so I'm just giving it the idea that, like, there are people that will fight to protect all that and try to say, no, 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 Revenge of the Nerds. That's not really rape. Like, yes, the fuck it is. But my motto for life is when you know better, do better. Don't pretend the shit didn't happen. Don't pretend it's not problematic by today's standards. Don't pretend it wasn't problematic then. It's just society was different, you know? And do better now. It's not bad to say, yo, that was fucked up. Oh, man, things were really fucked up then. You know, let's not keep that trope around, you know? Old things that happen in comic books that we consider classic, you know? Let's never do that again. Let's give voice to more writers with a better perspective. And if somebody explains to us why that's problematic, oh, wow, I didn't know that then. You know, it's the same thing. I'm going to finish with this. We're coming up on later in the fall. It will be 30 years since one of my all-time favorite movies, Carlito's Way, came out. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I saw Carlito's Way when I was 18 years old. When I saw Carlito's Way, I saw it and I thought, damn, that's fucked up. Look at what happened to Carlito, man. He was just trying to get out the game, man. Like, he could have had his happy ending, but, you know, they fucked it up for him. You know, he almost got free. I saw Carlito's Way again when I was 21. And I was like, hold on a second. I caught something I didn't catch before. When I was 25, I watched it again. I'm like, yo, by the time I'm 30, I watched Carlito's Way and I realized something. Everybody warned Carlito every time he fucked up, every time he took a bad step. Everybody warned him every single time he did the wrong thing. Carlito did it to himself.
And that's the point of that movie, you
Yeah.
know? Like
It took me 12 years to realize that, yo, oh my God, that's what the movie was when I saw it for the first time, but I couldn't see it because of my perspective, because of my age, because of my mindset. Now, by the same token, when I watched the first time I saw The Matrix, I believe I was 23 or 24, right? And when I saw it, I hated Cypher. Hated Cypher. Hated him. Switch. No, not like this. I was like, yo, Cypher's a punk. Cypher sucks. Then I watch it again when I'm 30, in my 30s, when I'm deep into the blog era, when I'm in the internet era, when I'm a writer, when I'm a creator trying to get above the noise. And I get it. I understand why Cypher did that. He had toiled for years. He thought he was getting free. He thought he was finding the answers, just to realize, there ain't shit I want here. I'm not even a big part of what's happening here. I don't think I'm making a dent. So if I get immersed back into this thing where I get to enjoy life again, where I'm back at that space where I think I'm actually working towards something that matters, I'd rather have that than the reality, the harsh reality of the world as it is. Just when I thought that could be it, but I was still happy. Erase all the shit from my mind. Give me everything I ever wanted so I'm actually happy again instead of being fucking miserable fighting the good fight. You know? Even though I don't agree with this viewpoint, I get it now. So I don't hate him like I did before. I don't hate him like I did the dude who was cowered in the corner the first time I saw Brothers, what do you call it? Finding Saving Private Ryan, right?
Mm.
He was a coward because he's huddled over there with all the ammunition. He can't save his people. Then you get older and you realize that could have been you, just depending on the situation. That dude's a coward. All his friends are out there fighting. You get better perspective. You understand life more. You know, you have more empathy. You've been in different situations. You've seen people down. You've been down. So, like, those are one of the things that I think that comes with age and experience. And it makes me a better writer. It makes me a better analyst. It makes me a better person to walk people through situations because I understand the world better. I understand people better. And moreover, I can take that and I can relate it when I write something. And I want to get that across. I have a different perspective and I have a different aim when I write now. you realize that there's more than one way this can go, more than one way something could be told, and more than one way to evoke an emotional reaction.
Right. Like if like the learning process never ends.
Yes.
And you're like, I know there's gonna be 80 million things that I haven't even learned yet. No, I feel like I've been doing this for a decade now, and I feel like I'm just getting started.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I'm a person now.
Yeah.
Like
I've been writing online since 2002, 2003, and I feel like I get better every year because I better understand myself and people.
right, and that's so invaluable and so priceless, and like that's like the best writers are constantly reevaluating the way they view the world and the way they view the art that they're or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be art, but like just whatever the subject is, they're constantly reevaluating their relationship to themselves, the world, and their subject. And that's
Yeah.
like that's how it should be, you
The
know.
only the only things that don't grow are dead, right?
Damn. That's
Things,
crazy.
things have to constantly evolve or they go stagnant.
Wow.
And so like I talk about something like the zombie film genre. Shit got to change. Somebody got to figure out a new wrinkle. Vampire films, there needs to be a new wrinkle. Sci-fi, we got to figure something else out. Black Mirror had figured out something, but then it got to the point where reality had trumped, what you could do with sci-fi. Especially this type of sci-fi, because life was it. So you got to figure out something else. And to me, some people are like, "Oh wow, it's messing up everything." No, because science fiction was created to tell people, "Hey, don't do this," and then you dumb.
Yeah.
So now we got to figure out another way.
That's what Jurassic Park is. I say that all the time. Like Jurassic Park, the movie is about, hey, don't make Jurassic Park. Like, like that's what the point is. And
Yeah,
yeah, anyway, yeah, man, yeah, exactly. Like 100% agree. Like,
Jason Asimov is rolling over in his grave right now. Mm-hmm. Is maybe a butler.
man, yeah. I still haven't seen Kindred yet. I talked to Susie Analog about it. I want to fix that. But and like I love iRobot. He probably wouldn't have liked that movie very much.
Oh, there's one of my favorite sayings, right? I'm sure
Yeah.
you the animated film Metropolis, right?
Of course I have. Yeah.
And they had the press conference, and they asked them, "Hey, so would the creator have loved this?" And everybody on the panel means like, "No, he absolutely would have hated this shit. He wouldn't want us to make this. He would have hated it." Everybody laughed, and that's the reality of it. He had his vision. He had the way he wanted his story told, and he didn't want anybody messing with it. But the thing is that what they did with that film introduced his world, introduced his writing, introduced his creations to multiple generations of people who probably had no idea he existed before.
Right. Yeah. It's a constant puzzle, and rearranging it and putting it back together in 8 different ways is what we all live for, and to really wrap this up, Dart Adams, if your life was a movie, what would it be about?
If my life was a movie, it would definitely be about growing up Black and Latino in the South End, Lower Roxbury of Boston between the years 1975 and 1996 or 7, and showing people what Boston is actually like and what life is like for non-white people who live here. So yeah, that would definitely be what my story would be about. I've had several different titles for it. I've had several different TV shows, several different ideas that I pitched, different book ideas. None of them have come to fruition, but that would definitely be it.
Man. I mean, like you said before, write what
Mhm.
and like those are stories worth telling, especially since you're the person who lived them. And I feel like the big point of this has been just like, don't don't feel like you shouldn't take control of your history and tell it properly.
Yeah.
Like that's been my big takeaway from all of this. And shit, I just lost my train of thought. But this was great. Like this was so, like I gotta be honest. Usually I have like a specific questions I ask. I didn't ask you any of my questions. That's how I know this went. I mean, like, not to say that anything that I did before didn't go really well, but like this was just this was crazy, man. Like we just went, you
Mhm.
know, it doesn't always happen like that. And not to say that everything should happen like that, but you know, it's just worth noting when it does. And like,
Yeah.
yeah,
To
this
me,
was
that's that's the encompassing thing. That's the overall story and the lesson I've learned from life. I have a list of things I want to do, list of things I want to have, and then shit happens in life, and it's just like, oh, it just happens, and you just go with it.
you just go off script. Yeah.
Yep.
You know, but yeah, nah, you know, just like as someone who's, you know, like obviously we've known each other for a pretty long time, and you know, I'm a fan and I appreciate what you do.
Same here.
So yeah, for real, thank you. It means the world, you know. I always I feel like I feel like I think a lot about, not that not that it's something I'm preoccupied with, but whenever I kind of, you know, like I've been stepping back and looking at what I've done and built a little more lately, and I'm realizing that I kind of stand in the middle of like a slightly younger and slightly older generation of like journalists and writers, and I kind of pull respect from from both ends, and that's the way it should be. Like, I feel like that's something, I don't want to say that's something that everyone should like aspire to, but I'm really happy that that's where I'm at. You know, like you know, like I have a lot of respect for people, you know, like younger and older than me, and I get that back from people. And you know, like you were one of the first that I can remember when I like really first started going at it, who was like, "You're dope." And
Mhm.
that meant a lot to me. So yeah, just based off of, you know, like all the, you've done so much work. I'm not gonna sit here and list it all, but
Mhm.
like yeah, it's thank you for being here. Thank you for wanting to come here, because you know, I'm just me. Like this is just me. So it's always more special when people want that. So yeah, I'm rambling, but thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate you.
It's super important to be the bridge. That's one thing I learned early on. It's super important to be the bridge. Everybody wants to be the person on stage. Everybody wants to be the person on the poster, on the flyer and shit like that. But it's so important to be the bridge. That's why when I wrote my first book, I had a whole list of people that I wanted to acknowledge in the back, because
Uh-huh.
I felt like that's what's important. I used to come up and read liner notes, and I read liner notes and album credits because I wanted to read the names of all these people who were connected to all these albums. And the people I gravitated to growing up were people I identified as like the bridges, like the names that always came up. And I was like, that's what I want to be when I grow up.
Right. You know, and you know, also thank you for including me in there. That really touched me a lot. And you know, it's like that's important, you know, like it's we don't all need to be siloed, you know, like one of my favorite sayings that I actually picked up from a Fonte record, you're only as old as your ability to process new information. You know, like that's like those are words I live by. I've lived by those words ever since I first heard them, you know, and like it's just I'm just I'm just happy to be in community with people who are not afraid and are willing to just kind of be surprised by shit and learn things, and just like the road doesn't have to end because you turn 32 or
Yeah.
whatever age you turn, you know, like especially not now, but like I don't know, I'm just like I don't know, it's just like the age is a thing that doesn't really matter to me, and I'm happy to see other people who feel the same. So yeah, shout out to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for listening. Shout out to y'all for making it this far. And shout out to all the black people listening too, because y'all really impeccable. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell a friend to come through next time. 1.